Thank you for tuning in to watch our Invest Philadelphia Leadership Summit. You're about to watch panel number 3, Leading the Charge, how strategic infrastructure is paving the way for Philly's EDS and MED success, and how leaders are overcoming obstacles. Be sure to like and subscribe for more leadership content. Enjoy.
All right, it is hopefully everyone's still awake. Here's your last panel here. We've had 2 really good panels so far. I'm Brad Faust, the market president for Ocean First Bank. Ocean First Bank's a regional bank headquartered right over the river in New Jersey. We've got a footprint from Boston down to DC. We opened our Philadelphia office here in 2019. And like a lot of people here, I bleed green. So hopefully next year. To our panel, we're going to be talking about EDS and MEDS. EDS and MEDS do not grow in isolation. Their success depends tightly on connected infrastructure systems, water quality, energy, reliability, building performance, and access to capital. When any one of those falls, expansion slows, costs rise, or patient care and education suffers. Today's conversation looks at how infrastructure leaders, utilities, designers, and financiers are coordinating decisions that will determine whether Philadelphia's EDS and MEDS institutions can grow sustainably over the next several decades. For the entire panel, and I'll go down as I go down if you just introduce yourselves. When an EDS and MEDS institution wants to expand a new lab, hospital wing, or campus facility, what's the first infrastructure constraint that shows up from your perspective, and how do you deal with it?
Hi, I'm Mike Rombach from NRG. We're located here and run our Eastern business out of Philadelphia. So my commute was from University City this morning. Happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. Just listening to the earlier panels, it strikes me that it's a good reminder how much is going on here in this city from an EDS and MEDS and much larger perspective. And it strikes me that we sitting up here now are the people that could either continue to enable it or keep it from being as good as it might otherwise be. So, when from our perspective, energy, I think we're facing some challenges as an industry right now, AI, demand growing faster than ever. And I think we have to take a beat and figure out how to keep that from being a problem. And to keep it from being a limiting factor to success we heard from. So just as you as individuals want to walk into a room, hit the light switch and have it come on, that's an expectation that should be met. We have to figure out how to do that as a community, as a state, as a region, how to take the energy we have and make it work and not become a limiting factor. And we do that every day with partners, and I it's becoming clearer to me that we need to do that more collaboratively as a community and a region.
Mike, thanks. Mark?
Yes, good morning. And I think it was a great conversation this morning that I heard. So many things going on in the area. I think you're spot on. As I think about the question, we are the foundation to much of what you're planning to do. We're buried beneath your feet. We're providing you the basics to do what it is that you set out to do. And so really, I think about planning. Of course, I think about water and wastewater. That's what I do. I work for Aqua Pennsylvania. I forgot to tell you that. We are the second largest investor-owned water utility in Pennsylvania. We provide water, wastewater services to 1.5 million people in 33 counties. And so we're behind, below, or around just about everything that happens with our customers in the service areas where we work. And what can happen many times when you think about problems, it's a lack of planning. So you all, when you get ready to do your work, and I'll put your hats on for a minute, even though I don't do it very well. So you're thinking about surgical centers and what types of services will we provide, and how many students will be in the chairs, and how many different types of people are going to work here. And sometimes we're an afterthought. And by doing that, you perhaps set yourself on a path that may be a little bit problematic. Because by the time you get down to the point of wanting to do plans and designs and all these fancy things, we may or may not be able to satisfy what's happening in your community, in your service area. So as I think about what can go wrong, I think it often happens when we're not included at the beginning stages of your planning, because we can often help move things along.
Thank you. Yulia?
Hi, everybody. Yulia Murphy. I'm with Key Bank. I focus on supporting all of our clients and customers within the healthcare sector in the Northeast. Key Bank is a large regional bank. Hopefully, most of you in the room are familiar with our organization. I'm just going to kind of piggyback off of that answer. So oftentimes, before financing even comes into the question, right? The first question we would like organizations to think about in terms of infrastructure is, can the existing infrastructure support the planned expansion, right? What's the power availability? What is water capacity? What is the resilience of this infrastructure to support the project? From a banking point of view, these aren't just technical questions. They're going to directly impact project timelines, operating costs, and ultimately your ability to finish this project. So our responsibility and how we work best with organizations and institutions in the healthcare and education space is to try and align with all the strategic partners early and often. A good example of how we look at financing for a construction project is we underwrite the credit quality of the institution, but a big component of a construction project is hiring an outside third-party engineer to do a plan and cost review, to make sure that we have all of the right people from a project standpoint working on the design, the engineering aspects, and thinking about all of the things that I just mentioned. That same engineer, once our financing is finalized, will be doing monthly site inspections to not only confirm work is being completed as what was designed in the project we signed up for, but checking, do we have change orders? What are hurdles that we've encountered? Are these all things that we considered at the onset of a project?
Yulia, thank you. And finally, Martin.
Great. Thank you. So I'm Martin Kimmel of Kimmel Architecture. So I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle. But we work out of Philadelphia, founded here, Washington, D.C., and Pittsburgh. And we work exclusively for mission-driven institutions, so well represented here today, organizations have a mission of service, not for profit. They have a constituency that is served by the mission. They have professional staff that implements it. They have a fiduciary duty to spend other people's money well. And it's a great place to be. And what we see in working for these institutions is the two biggest, I'll call them infrastructure, and I'm going to stretch the term a little bit. It's land and it's money. Those things are driving us today everywhere we go. We find that people have not square footage gaps. They have plenty of square footage, but they don't have the right square footage. So now is the right time to reinvest and rethink how existing facilities can actually support the mission better. But also, while we're at it, we can actually reduce load. So we're working with the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton with their existing library. We're doubling the square footage and reducing the overall energy consumption at the same time, which is kind of hard to believe. But many of the buildings that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s are such energy hogs that as you reinvest in them, you can rebrand them to make them more relevant to the institution to help recruit and retain the folks that you want to be there. But then you can also drop load instead of add load, which normally you think of new construction as adding load. And there's a lot of great strategies to do that.
Martin, thank you. And I'll just say before I go on to the next question is a banker like Julia, a lot of times I get brought in, as Julia does, when the project is almost ready to go. And it wasn't until I was preparing for this panel that I really started to think about my next question, which is going to go to Mark, about some of the infrastructure that has to go into these projects, but particularly some of these bigger eds and meds projects, sometimes years before the project's shovel ready. And I really didn't appreciate that till I really started to do some research for this panel. So with that, this next question's to Mark. Aqua has invested heavily in PFAS treatment systems, often before mandates require them. How are aging water systems, emerging contaminants, and public health expectations changing in the way eds and meds institution think about water reliability and its risk?
Yeah, so it almost continues on what I talked about before about planning. Water supply projects can take decades, literally decades to build. Now, that's not necessarily what we're talking about here when we talk about infrastructure, if it's a pump or a pipe or treatment plant, but some projects can literally take decades. And as an aside, when you think about the service we provide, and I'll tie that into planning here, our services is utility we provide is the only one that's ingested. I don't know about you, but the first thing that my doctor does when she walks in to see me is wash her hands with water that we provide. It is the basic service of so many things that happen in our lives, and we never really think about it. Imagine a surgeon going into work and not being able to wash their hands, or trying to fill a baby's bottle and not being able to do so. So it really is that basic. So you think about, well, what does it take? How do we think about our projects? How do we think about providing this service? And it really is planning. We do planning constantly. And what I mean by that is this: we'll do audits of our own facilities every 5 years with a 20-year lookout. And we rotate them constantly because we're learning more. What are the new regulations? What are the anticipated regulations? What's happening with the facilities? Can I get different pieces of material? Supply chain is so important today. And so we are constantly updating, thinking about mandating new mandates that are being imposed on us. In 1948, there was the first Water Control Pollution Act. Since then, there have been dozens of new regulations. PFAS is one of the biggest ones that's out there, and we hear about it so many times. The firefighting foam that was used for decades that's now found its way into our water supply. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars removing this from our drinking water when we didn't put it there. But our customers look at us who are using our water for the things that I mentioned, and they're saying, what are you doing about it? How are you protecting us? And so we'll spend over $400 million invested in removing this contaminant and many others to protect and think about what we have to do and think about how we're going to do it, because we know it takes so long to do what it is that we have to do every day.
Mark, thank you. This question's for Mike. Mike, AI, data centers, and electrification are driving unprecedented energy demand. Even in a state that exports power, how is rising demand from healthcare systems, research facilities, and advanced computing changing the way energy infrastructure must be planned for the Philadelphia region?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you hit a key point there. Philadelphia, as part of the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth as part of the PJM grid, is really a portion of a 12 or 13 state community. And so Pennsylvania is, I believe, the only one in that PJM grid that exports power at this point. But it doesn't change the fact that Philadelphia is being challenged and the state's being challenged by what's going on in the larger electric grid. So I think that the challenge of the day is, and the conversation of the day is, these AI data centers, and they really are phenomenal consumers of electricity, but they also represent, in many ways, progress to some of you in what you do. And so we have to take the good with the bad and figure out how to balance it. So right now, there's a big push to build more power plants, and that's appropriate. But it takes 4 or 5 years to do that. From the date you decide and you have your funding and you're ready to go and the permits, it's 4 or 5 years. And honestly, right now, there aren't enough turbines being manufactured in the world to support that plant that you would build today. So that's another leap. So it forces us to say, what are we going to do for the next 5 years as part of the bigger solution? And the answer is all of you, as both personal consumers and in the corporate and cause-based institutions that you're part of, you are the answer to that question. It is far more logical that we should figure out how to better utilize the resources, how to take that building that has load that is here and drop it to here, or to give you tools as even a home consumer of energy to have time of use where you run the dishwasher at night when it's not putting an extra load on the grid. You figure out how to charge your EV, not on the hottest day in July between 5 and 6 o'clock when everybody came home and turned on their air conditioner. That so reducing consumption or distributing it to better time periods is really the near-term necessity. It's not just a good idea, it's a necessity. And I think we have to start there. And I represent the consumer side of our business, the residential side. So we've acquired a company that is bringing smart home technology into our business. And we're thinking about how to enable customers to make these decisions for themselves. You know, you can argue about the price of electricity. None of us controls that. But the surest way to save money is to use less of it, or to use it more efficiently, or to use it at a better time. And so we're bringing that to our residential customers and trying to figure out solutions to this problem. And on the commercial side, which is more than half the energy we consume in this country, we're doing that on our commercial business that I'm not directly a part of. But it's the same thing, you know, this concept of virtual power plant, VPPs. We just acquired a company that's the largest VPP provider in the country, and we'll be bringing that to a lot of our commercial partners here locally. So the solution is on both sides of where you spend 8 hours of your day and where you spend the other 16. We're going to have to figure this out together before those plants we all know we need to build get built. And frankly, if we do it intelligently, we will have to build less of those plants. And that's a better thing for everyone as well. So I think it's really, again, we're enabling the progress. We can't keep it from happening. And that's what we have to figure out together.
Mike, thank you. Martin, in your interview with Invest, you described your mission as extraordinary solutions for ordinary budgets. In today's tight capital environment, how are eds and med clients redefining what success looks like in a building, and where are they asking designers to make hard trade-offs?
So a great question. So yeah, our firm mission is just that, extraordinary solutions for ordinary budgets. It's a 30-year-old mission that we still continue to live with today. But interestingly enough, as capital has become tighter, as student enrollments have gone down, it's more relevant than it ever is, because people are really, whether they used to have to do this or not, they now have to figure out how to do more with less. And we are agents of trying to have that happen. So we look at it as a three-pronged approach. So first of all, we think mission matters. So how many folks here represent an institutional, you're visiting, but you're representative of an institution rather than a vendor or somebody like that? Half-ish, maybe? Great. So your mission matters more now than ever, no matter what your mission is or who you're trying to attract, either as a patient or as a student. Doubling down on why you even exist is a great hedge. And we utilize that in design. If we focus on mission first, you can right-size projects to just do what is necessary to move the needle for you, not just keep up with the Joneses. So that's one strategy. Of those people that raise their hands, how many people have facilities or buildings on their campus that they love to hate? I would think if it was built in the 50s, a soul-sucking, place that it's not fun to teach, works, do surgery, whatever. Everybody's saddled with that. If you ever wondered why that was the post-war boom, unfortunately, the style of architecture at that time was what it was. And it was a lot of first strike Cold War engineering. So buildings were engineered to stand, but not to be loved. So you're stuck with them. They're hard to tear down, but they're not hard to reinvent. So if you can marry the idea of taking a mission-oriented goal that's going to move the needle for you, while you're at it, you're going to now tackle square footage and facades that are very hateable and make them better, give them new life. You're going to now actually do what I said earlier, which is reduce the load on your infrastructure. So you're going to save money and thereby be able to put that money to what matters more, the extraordinary solution, ordinary budget. So the last thing that we really strive for is if there, I don't know if there's any other architects in the room, but one of our strengths and weaknesses, we're creative people, right? In theory, or at least hopefully we are. But most of creativity is spent on aesthetics, making things look beautiful, as you hopefully see in this room, among many other places nearby, and operational layout. But that's only about 20% of any capital architectural project. The other 80%, though, consumes the money. So our approach is to use that same creative thought at every phase to design waste out so that you can put the money toward the value that matters to the mission, matters to the square footage, matters to the operational goal. And, I would encourage you to challenge the people you're working with to get on board with that kind of thinking. And you'll find that your capital goes further, which makes it easier to fund things and not come back to your board and tell them why you couldn't do it for the money they have.
Martin, great. Thank you. And good segue in for Yulia. Healthcare and higher infrastructure projects are capital intensive and long dated, often colliding with volatile interest rates and tighter margins. How are institutions prioritizing infrastructure investment today, and what tends to get delayed or rescoped when capital tightens?
Sure. What we have found working with institutions is they really tend to focus the infrastructure projects that are mission critical and revenue generating. So whether it's adding clinical capacity, research facilities, or just making your existing infrastructure more sustainable, the organization will find a way to prioritize that capital expenditure. Projects that often get delayed or re-engineered or redesigned or potentially phased in are often those related to administrative upgrades or aesthetic upgrades. The reality is the capital is out there. Those institutions that have stable operating margins, solid balance sheets, and just a very clear strategic plan and vision for their capital projects, they have pretty efficient access to capital. The capital has just become a lot more disciplined. And so as you take on that capital, just being really thoughtful around how is this going to impact my cash flow, my operations, how can I allocate that risk, and what are the financing mechanisms that I have to leverage in order to get this capital project off the ground. Maybe that's working with a banking partner, maybe it's tapping into the bond market, or maybe it's through a public-private partnership and working with a strategically aligned partner. We think that I'll answer now, sorry, the second part of the question was just the volatile interest rate environment. So when I talk to organizations, and yes, oftentimes banks get brought in when a lot of the things are finalized, we also have a lot of organizations that we work with as they're just beginning to kind of plan these projects and think about what are all of the different financing scenarios that I can look into. It's important to have a strong governance structure where you have on your board representation, both on the real estate and the financing side. As nonprofit organizations, a lot of times you may also engage in hiring an advisor to kind of help you sort through all of the options. From a banking perspective, at KeyBank, we have the ability to have conversations with you around private placement, so tax-exempt financing that's on bank balance sheet, or provide access and underwrite bonds if you choose to do a public financing option. We talked to you about interest rate risk. Interestingly enough, my experience in working with nonprofits, they prefer to always look at a fixed rate financing, more or less because that gives you a lot of certainty in what your interest rate will look like for the duration of the project, almost a set it and forget it mentality. When we're at a time of rising rates or declining rates, conversation I always like to bring into the mix is, does hedging the interest rate risk make sense? Is a fully fixed rate the right option for you? Even if that's what you ultimately decide to do, my job in a lending capacity is making you aware of all of the options that you have. So not only do they make sense from you from a cost perspective, but they also align with the strategic goals of your board and of your organization.
Julia, thank you very much. For our final question to everyone, and I'm going to start with Mike. This is looking ahead. If Philadelphia wants its eds and meds ecosystem to remain competitive 20 years from now, what infrastructure decisions being made today will most impact, and what happens if we get that wrong? Mike?
I'm not going to stand in front of a group of Philadelphians and tell you how to win. because the city has a long history of doing that. But I will never forget a coach that said to me, the first step in learning how to win is learning how not to lose. And I kind of think that's where we find ourselves as a key part of the infrastructure and as an industry. I think we have to look at everybody who is a beneficiary of the electric grid and ask everyone to play a role in helping to make more of it while we fix the problems. It would be great that in 5 years you don't want or need to have anyone from the energy industry up here because it's no longer a limiting factor. But I think that's going to happen by not doing the foolish things we could be tempted to do. I had a conversation recently in Harrisburg with the regulatory body that we all report to in the electrical industry, and this happens to be a state that has more than most smart meters. So at your homes, at your places of business, you have a smart meter, which means that it can be controlled in many useful ways. And the comment made as we were leaving the room was, sometimes I think the meters are smarter than we are. And it was a telling comment because it's true. The meter on your house, which by the way, or on your business that you paid for, is largely not being used to help you save money on the thing you paid for. And that's a challenge as an industry. We resolved long before it was given voice. And I know there may be some people who take issue with the word affordability, but affordability of electricity is something that affects each of you in your home and each of you in your place of work, whatever your mission is. And we have challenged ourselves to be an energy company that should consider it a win if we can help our customers use less energy, because that's what will work for all of us. And I just think we have to get smarter about that. We have to not take the obvious loss for want of having a reasoned, logical idea be more exposed and more actionable by the people out here in this room. So I think that in 5 years, we will have talked about overcoming this AI demand boom. And many of you have probably seen this, but the general electricity demand curve for 100 years looked something like this. And in the last couple of years, if you take everything that AI could do, it literally goes to a curve like that. And we just weren't prepared for that. Even if not all of it is real, some of it is real. We have to deal with. In 5 years, we should have overcome that. We should have a plan. But I think in that 5 years, since of necessity, we have to be smarter individual consumers and advising key partners how to be better consumers, we have to do what Martin was talking about. We have to find ways to drop that load. And I think we'll have a different conversation to get from year 5 to year 20, because we'll have adopted better practices that encourage affordability for consumers and commercial users. And that's when I think we'll be on the road to, more success. The grid's not a limiter.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to piggyback off of something Martin said when he was referring to the buildings you love to hate. So he said those buildings were built, maybe after the Second World War, and a lot of our infrastructure around the United States, certainly older communities, was built around the same time to support those buildings. So the pipes beneath your feet are maybe not in such good shape, maybe the same for gas and electric. And I think we really need to start thinking about what it is to improve those facilities so that they can support the growth we want. The American Society of Civil Engineers, in its 2025 infrastructure report card, which is really a pretty neat read if you're interested in everything infrastructure, gave our countries, they give you a grade, they gave our country's drinking water system a C plus and our wastewater system a D minus. And look, that's not good enough. We're talking about some really neat things that you all want to do in this room, and we're going to build it on a C plus and a D minus foundation. That's just never going to work. And so we really need to think about what do we need to do to get this to be successful. I think we as a community, we've heard that word a lot today, we need to understand that the infrastructure we have built when we were talking about maybe post-war, maybe in the 70s, it was built to treat things in the parts per million. Today we look at parts per trillion, and it's the same or similar infrastructure. And so we're pushing this infrastructure to do more than it was ever envisioned to do. And it is more challenging and it is more expensive, but it's absolutely essential if we want to draw these businesses, which we heard so much about today, and schools to succeed in our communities, to be the trendsetters that we all want Philadelphia to be. And I think we need to have a little bit more. I think we need to have the business incentives, right? How do we incentivize these businesses to come here? Is it some sort of creative financing? Is it some sort of a creative legislation that entices them to come here and then stay here? But it's all built on the foundation that we're talking about when we say the stuff that we have, a lot of it is old, it's outdated, it needs to be updated, and it needs to be brought into this century in order for us to continue going. And I really don't want to think about what it looks like if it doesn't work right, because it's not a pretty picture. We can do this. We just need to work together to solving the problem and recognize that we all have a similar problem. And it starts with the foundation, which is so much of what we heard today and the goals of what we heard today and what you all want to achieve. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
So I have two thoughts. One, just building off of what was just said is, making sustainability a core focus and not a side project, right? We talked about what are, the top constraints that institutions face today when approaching an infrastructure project. And typically, the gating question to that is, can the infrastructure support the expansion? So in every capital project that you take on, that should be a core focus. There are financing incentives around energy efficiency out there. Be educated on what those are and make sure the team that you have working with you is educated on what those are, and be taking advantage of those today, because anything that you're doing today, right? Real estate has a useful life of 25, 30 years, right? So that's the minimum duration of the project that you're undertaking. The other thought that I have, just switching gears a little bit, is really invest in relationships around public and private partnerships. We talked a lot today about access to capital. Having a strong partner in the private sector can give you that access to capital. It also gives you ability to share the risk of the project. It can improve not only operating costs, but timelines to get that project done. And it will give you more avenues to get financing. So those conversations and those relationships should be ongoing and not just present when you have a capital project planned in the horizon.
Great. Thank you. And finally, Martin.
Excellent. Thanks. So first, I would say, from our perspective, continued relevance for institutional owners is the most important thing. You want to continue to be relevant into the future. And so I'll circle back to mission. That mission matters more than it ever has, and you need to reinvest in that. On the physical side of it, however, I would say that you need to win the war against deferred maintenance. Okay? Deferred maintenance is it's soul sucking, like brutalist buildings a little bit, at any rate. And so you have to start looking at those things as not just expenses to get ahead of your own problems, but look at them as business opportunities and look for the return on investment, where you can actually solve a deferred maintenance problem and get a return through energy savings projects, through envelope improving projects, and get the Buildings and Grounds Committee to understand it's not just a cost out. Look at the savings that comes back, and creative ways to fund that also is important. If you're in a fundraising mode where you're raising money for capital projects, we always say, we want to know your three biggest problems that you have on deferred maintenance. Let's put these inside a sexier project that we're going to raise money for, and just knock a couple things down everywhere you go. The last thing I'll say about it is space utilization. And this pertains mostly to higher ed, but equally to higher ed publics and privates, is that you have massive facilities typically that are often very underutilized. And to get serious about that as a business, to get faculty to teach classes on Fridays, to get faculty to teach classes on Monday mornings, you find you almost never need any new square footage. It's you just have to start becoming more a business case for why these things make sense. And then once you do that, and you don't have to build as many new square feet, you have more money to reinvest in the problems you have.
Great. Thank you. And I think probably my takeaway from hearing the panel here is there's a lot of challenges out there, whether it's energy, water treatment, financing, or how we design buildings. But what I think someone said earlier on that, Philadelphians work together. And kind of what I hear across all of you is that if we work together to solve this, it'll get solved. If we don't work together, we've got a long road ahead of us. Okay. Thank you very much.